You can subscribe to The Leader through your podcast provider, and please do like, comment and share wherever you can. The Leader is available at 4 p.m. every day. From the Evening Standard in London, this is The Leader.
Evening Standard, it's your Evening Standard.
Hi, I'm David Marsland. There's all-out war in Washington.
The truth is that Trump's approval ratings are the highest since he came to office, at 49%. So you've got roughly half the country think he's doing a pretty good job, which is slightly higher than the number of people who voted for him.
Evening Standard columnist Philip Delves Broughton on the battles between Pelosi and Trump. Can Pete Buttigieg rise from the Democrat rubble? And
I think when you speak to Londoners, or when people sit in their living room think, what are the big issues for London? It's what I call the Trinity, really. There's crime, there's housing, and there's environment.
Conservative London mayoral candidate Shaun Bailey talks to The Leader about transport, housing, policing, and his anti-Norma. Taken from the Evening Standard's editorial column, this is The Leader. For the whole thing, pick up the newspaper or head to standard.co.uk/comment. In a moment, the turmoil in US politics with Philip Delves Broughton. Meet Pete Buttigieg.
My name is Pete Buttigieg. They call me Mayor Pete. I am a proud son of South Bend, Indiana, and I am running for President of the United States.
Barely a year ago, many called him Mayor Pete simply because they couldn't say his surname. He's helpfully put a guide on his Twitter bio. Now he's taken a big stride towards becoming the Democrats' candidate for president by taking an apparent lead in the Iowa Caucus over this guy.
Today marks the beginning of the end for Donald Trump. The most dangerous president in modern American history.
Bernie Sanders. He's having another crack at the nomination after being beaten to it by Hillary Clinton in 2016. And we all know how that turned out. Neither of these men was supposed to have a chance. It's supposed to be Joe Biden's year. But as our editorial column points out, there's nothing more unpredictable than a US election.
One of them is a 78-year-old Jewish democratic socialist.
The American people understand that if you work 40 hours a week, you should not live in poverty, and that we've got to raise that minimum wage to at least $15 an hour.
One is a 38-year-old gay former mayor of a town smaller than Ipswich.
A campaign that some said should have no business even making this attempt has taken its place at the front of this race to replace the current president with a better vision for the future.
Both are out to beat a 73-year-old New York billionaire.
We're moving forward at a pace that was unimaginable just a short time ago, and we are never, ever going back.
Who in turn took over from a now 58-year-old African-American academic who spent part of his childhood in Indonesia.
Yes, we can. Yes, we did. Yes, we can. Thank you. God bless you. May God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you.
None of them, said the experts, had a chance when things got serious in US presidential races. Yet Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg are out to do what Donald Trump and Barack Obama did by proving the experts wrong. There's a lot that's weird about US electoral politics. Look at the chaos in the Iowa Caucus this week, or the similar mess in 2012 when the Republicans declared 3 different results. Or the fact that in 2016, Clinton won 2.8 million more votes than Trump, but didn't get the job. Despite it, a sort of raw democracy keeps working. Contests reward candidates who fight their corner and connect with voters, not ones who think they are entitled to win. Like or loathe the people who end up as president because of them, but elections should be tales of the unexpected.
Evening Standard columnist Philip Delves Broughton is on the line from New York, where he's at least attempting to keep up with events in the States. Philip, there's so much to talk about. Let's start with Iowa. Has that been sorted out yet?
It's still not fully resolved after these technical difficulties, but we're about half to two-thirds of the way the votes counted. It should be done in the next day or two. But that's really the big story, is Buttigieg and Sanders out in front, and Biden really dropping backwards very poorly. He really needs to recover in New Hampshire, or he's cooked.
It's really interesting about Pete Buttigieg because, just a year ago, all we knew about him was that none of us knew how to say his second name, so we're all calling him Mayor Pete. But now, how likely is it that he could become the Democrat contender for the presidency?
Well, the story is always that, if you win one of either Iowa or New Hampshire, the two first primaries in this race, you have a very, very good shot. So I think, the campaign really that everyone's comparing it to is Obama in 2008. Buttigieg is young. He's relied on a lot of tech talent, hired a lot of young, smart people from Facebook, Google to work on his campaign. He has a very sophisticated fundraising operation. And despite his age and inexperience, he's also establishment in the sense he went to Harvard, he worked at McKinsey, the management consultancy. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He has a lot of, brass rings already in his pocket. And he could really start to surge. And especially if on the other side, his main rival is Bernie Sanders, who's a senator. He's his third or fourth run. He's in his 70s. He's pretty much on the hard left of the party. It's very possible to see Buttigieg as the strong, centrist, viable candidate coming down the middle and who could be a rival to Trump. The one big alternative to him will start to look like Mayor Bloomberg, who has, I think, benefited enormously from this, because his view has been, or former New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg, has been that this primary contest is a sham. It's no way to choose a president. He, meanwhile, has been quietly, well, not so quietly, spending tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of his own money on advertising in other states. And he'll probably look at this chaos in Iowa and think, he made a pretty good decision. He's running a completely different sort of campaign. And then Democrats will have to ask themselves, who is their most likely to beat Donald Trump?
Now, it was the State of the Union address yesterday. Nancy Pelosi clearly didn't like it very much. She ripped it up. What's the rest of America thinking of it?
Well, the truth is that Trump's approval ratings are the highest since he came to office, at 49%. So you've got roughly half the country think he's doing a pretty good job, which is slightly higher than the number of people who voted for him. So, this has been a good week for Donald Trump. The impeachment did not work. I mean, in the basic sense that Donald Trump emerged it acquitted, he's not impeached. But I think a lot of Americans looked at it as a massive waste of time. Even, people who are opposed to Trump were asking themselves, was this the right thing to try and get him on? Because they didn't get him. He's now walking out of this claiming to be fully vindicated despite all the evidence. The economy is strong, and with several months to go to an election, he's got his base fired up, angry at Democrats, and he's in a very strong position. So I think a lot of Democrats are looking at this as a very, very botched process. One has to look at Trump, and he's got a very strong tailwind behind him. At so many points in his presidency, people thought this was on the verge of collapse. And he's going into 2020 stronger than he was in 2016, when he was a real outsider. Not only does he have the White House, the advantage of being president, but he's got a strong economy, a really fortified base, and an opposition that's looking rather chaotic and disorganized. That could all change very quickly over the next few months. But if you were Donald Trump or anyone in his White House, you're feeling pretty good right now.
Next.
For me, the cost of living in London, housing, is personal. I spent much of my early 20s into my early 30s sofa surfing, constantly having to move around. So for me, personally, I want to solve it.
Shaun Bailey tells the leader what he'd do as London mayor. Shaun Bailey is the 49-year-old former youth worker who the Conservatives have picked to be their candidate for London mayor. But what would he do with the job? He sat down with the leader to talk about policing, transport and housing in an interview recorded before the terror attack in Streatham last week. We also discuss how he survived being all but homeless to forge a political career. But I began by asking him about London's spiralling violent crime with the question, how do you stop that?
To me, it's quite clear. We need a tough and a tender approach. So on the tough end, you'll hear me talking about a record amount of police from the money we already have in City Hall. You hear me talk about new technologies to help with stop and search, so called scan and search. You can scan what is in people's pockets. And also hear me talk about giving the police the backing and the finances to do the job. I think our current mayor talked about, reducing stop and search as much as he could when he became mayor. I've always thought that was a bit of a problem, because although stop and search isn't the be all and end all by any means, it does send a signal alongside decent patrolling that the police are here and visible, and that's how that's how you get across that it is not the Wild West. You cannot do it as you please. We are here to get you. I think on the other end of that, though, what I want to do is start a thing called a second chance fund. So if you look in London now, about a third of people caught up in a knife crime offence, a low knife crime offence possession, will go on to offend again. And what we should be doing with that teachable moment is offering them extra support and extra funding to get out of that criminal way of life before it becomes really serious to them. One of the things you realise as a youth worker is you send the kids to any sort of detention, and you basically send a kid with a GCSE, but they come back with a PhD in crime, I'm telling you. And to stop that revolving door between community and prison would just be... That's what you do when you're trying to solve the long-term problems around crime, one of the big ticket items there.
So I wanted to pick up with you. You talked about record policing numbers, and you suggested that London already had the money for that.
Yeah, so if you look at there's two big things here. One thing, when Sadiq Kahn first became the mayor, one of the first things he did, almost the first thing he did, was remove a significant amount of money from the police salary budget. So that meant they were never going to reach the figure, so their numbers are always going to go down. That's a poor decision he made. So that's a large part of the money it was budgeted for. The second piece is he spent money building his own back office rather than spending money on police officers. So instead of getting police officers, he spent the money on press officers. I've been able to find £83 million, and there is more to come to provide police officers here in London with the money we already have.
But if you're talking about reversing some of the things that Sadiq Kahn has done, you're talking about press officers being hired instead of police officers, doesn't that mean job cuts as well?
Actually, it doesn't, because what we've done in City Hall, Sadiq Kahn's had a 45% rise in staff. And we certainly know he hasn't had a 45% rise in activity. That definitely hasn't happened. And a lot of these roles are not even filled. They're budgeted to be filled. I just wouldn't fill them because I don't think they're necessary. I'd keep that money and I'd redirect it to policing and all the other things that help keep London safe. So on one end, you're talking about policing, but as I said before, you're also talking about education, art projects, physical things to make London safe. The money is there. It's just being wasted inappropriately.
But there'll be no job losses then?
No, not initially, no. And again, a place like City Hall, such a big staff complement, you're looking at natural wastage, which will also help with that as well.
On transport, you've already said that you'll increase fares?
I think what I've said about fares is the mayor already has a fares increase plan. He's just hidden. He just won't speak about it. It's in TfL's budget for 2021. But of course, that's post election, and he'll talk about it then. I want to be upfront with Londoners straight from the bat. Fares will have to go up a little bit, but only a little bit. inflation and plus RPI. But the reason I say that is because we are losing things here. We've wasted 3 years. So the mayor's fares freeze, which is reannounced, has cost us, and I explain. So we have cancelled or postponed 18 infrastructure projects. And why they're important, because many of them would have opened up areas of London for housing, and that would lower our overall cost of living. So if you're sat there now thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want my fares to go up, neither do I have to pay them as well. But what you do want to go down is your rent. What you do want to change is your ability to buy. Those things are only going to happen if we could travel to and fro parts of London.
When you say fares go up just a little bit, what does just a little bit mean?
Plus RPI, just that measure of RPI, we do it all the time. That's how fares rises have been looked at in the past, and I'll do it again. And let's be clear, if we didn't need to raise fares, I wouldn't. But look at the calamity that is TfL's finances. At best, they'll run with a £300 million deficit. We can't let that keep going year on year on year, particularly as I want to provide things like step-free access. I want to provide things like the Baker Lou extension. I want to do things around the Metropolitan Line extension. There's so many projects in London that we need to do. And I've just remembered the DLR. And let's be clear, the big ticket item here is Crossrail 2. Crossrail 1 is so far behind and so far over budget that now people are talking about we won't be able to finance Crossrail 2. That will be a disaster, both, socially and also financially for London.
One thing you brought up there that I wanted to go back to was the housing issue in London, the cost of living in London.
Yeah.
Can you bring that down?
For me, the cost of living in London, housing is personal. I spent much of my early 20s into my early 30s sofa surfing, just staying in people's houses for a couple of weeks, a year, a month, constantly having to move around. So for me personally, I want to solve it. No matter what people tell you, the only solution is supply. Supply. So when the mayor says he wants to bring in rent controls, I know it sounds attractive, but there's three things I want you to consider. Nowhere in the world has rent controls worked. It always reduces supply. And the mayor is being disingenuous because he knows he doesn't have the powers. So if you're not in a secure renting position now, you won't ever be in one. You won't ever be in one. Rent controls damages supply. And I go back to my first point, supply. That's how we cure the cost of living around housing. That's how we cure homelessness as well. And it's how we bring rents down to a sustainable level because there is a great supply.
Do you mind if I ask you a personal question about sofa surfing?
Go for it.
What was that kind of period in your life like? Because it must have been full of a lot of uncertainty around that time.
I mean, uncertainty doesn't get close to the pressure that gives for you. But I'll give you an example. I have a friend called Alex who put me up for probably the best part of 18 months while I was at uni. And I just said to him, I've got nowhere to stay, don't know what I'm going to do. And he just, in a throwaway comment, just said, come and stay with me. And at that time, a young man, trying to be hard about everything, I nearly wept. I remember sitting in the canteen with him saying that to me, and me thinking, wow, for you, that's a casual thing. For me, that's life-changing. And much of my politics has been motivated by, hoping that I can help as many people not face that situation. I remember coming back from uni and bumping into my Aunt Norma and her asking me, what's your big plan? What are you going to do? And all the rest of that. And I explained to her, and she said, but you didn't say where you're going to stay. And I said, I haven't quite sorted it out yet. And she said to me, look, come and stay with me, And I assured her I'd be with her for 3 weeks. I was there for 3 months, then a year. I left, and then I was back. I left, and then I was back again. And without that, my Auntie Norma she basically said to me, I'm your safety net. And it's always led me to have this comment I'll make about life. If you come from a struggling community, poor parents, whatever, you're living life without a safety net. That's why you won't hear me talk about things that only sound good for me, rent controls, but are not good in reality. I'm determined to be straight with people and tell them the reality of the situation because I want people to live with that safety net.
Is this run for mayor for Auntie Norma?
This running for mayor is for Carmen Rose, who's my mum, Auntie Norma, who's my rock. It's for all the boys I grew up with who haven't had the same kind of outcomes I've had. It's for people who have to work for a living. I remember speaking at an event and someone said to me, but you're Tory, what would you know? And I stood on the stage and I mimed. And what I was doing was miming, pushing a bread knife into my kids' piggy bank to take out the money that their grandparents had given to them and swearing to myself that I'd pay it back. And instantly that lady understood that I understand. My politics, all of it is for ordinary people. The way I would do it is this. If 2 weeks after payday, are you saving or are you praying for the next payday? I'm for those people. I'm for people who, look, we don't want a handout. We just want the opportunity to succeed. And I think the vast majority of Londoners, that's where they sit. They need to understand where their money's coming from and what their bill's going to look like. And they will cope as long as we can provide work and transport and a clean environment for them to exist in.
And that's The Leader. You can also read a profile of Shaun Bailey written by our comment editor, Susanna Butter, where he talks about the recent death of his younger brother, Dwayne. That's online at standard.co.uk. This podcast is back at 4 p.m. tomorrow.